Hi, welcome. I am Ethan Chazen, a New York-based organization development coach. And if you follow along on my YouTube channel, you know that I'm passionate about helping organizations to create amazing workforce cultures. The reason that I do that is, well, it's twofold, to be honest. The first is from my own experiences, having spent the better part of the first 20 years of my career working in organizations that just shared a pretty much a universal pattern of behavior of not caring a whole lot about their people. And so that led me to go out on my own 15 years ago to start my consulting practice, where I work with organizations of all types on how to unleash their people's untapped potential. So over the last 35 years, I've seen a thing or two, and I've applied that in my practice, working with over 500 organizations. And I want to spend a little bit of time in this video. It's something I don't usually do. I want to spend a little bit of time walking through a proprietary 18-question workforce vitality audit that I typically use as one of the precursor first steps to going in and getting a firmer grasp of an organization's existing culture. So the first question that I'll ask is, do you have a recent census that you've conducted? So if you know what a census is, you go in and you currently take a snapshot of all the people in your organization, the same way you would in a country. So a census is, do you have the right people in the right roles right now? And so we look by function, by title, by department, by location. We look at full-time, part-time, permanent, contract, seasonal. We take a look literally across the entirety of the organization to put a finger on the pulse of what's going on right now in the organization. And that's typically helpful in that we see where the gaps are. Right? We see in terms of where the talent is, where we've got everybody on board that we need, versus opportunities where we have vacancies, or we have planned future growth, and we don't have the right people or enough people or any people to staff those kind of ambitious future-facing goals or objectives. We're not ready to take care of opportunities. So it really gives a holistic view. The second is, do you administer a personality assessment of any sort? And so what we know is, in really great organizations, they work pretty darn hard to create cultures where people fit, where people's background, personality, preferred style of communication, where it literally makes sense, where each individual knows their preferred style of interaction and communication and their team members, so they can see how they fit into their team, their functional area, and then the bigger scope. So I am a certified extended DISC personality assessment coach. And so that's why I like to understand who, if anybody, has had a personality assessment, and has it been implemented across the organization, and has it been done relatively recently, meaning in the past 2 years. Okay, and so it doesn't matter the type of tool. Most of them, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Berkman, Kersey, they're all wrapped around Carl Jung's style of categorizing people into 4 primary styles of personality. If it's in the DISC language, we talk about a dominant or driver, an influencer, a servant master, or somebody who's concise or analytical. And then how do you use these personality assessments, or do you use them at all to gauge in your organization how people prefer to interact with each other, their natural state of communication style and personality, and how drastic is the change from their natural comfort zone to when they go into work? Then I ask them, as a result of the first few questions, how comfortable are you right now? And I typically like to get a snapshot of the leadership team. How comfortable are you in the return that you're getting on your people investment strategy? So if you think about that, many decades ago, and I started my career in marketing, many decades ago, we talked about, I know half of my advertising's wasted. I just don't know which half. Well, nowadays, when we look at the workforce of the 21st century, with typically 5 generations of people engaged and people working hybrid or virtually as a result of COVID, we don't always know if we're getting a maximum return on our people investment. So that's why part of my work, my consulting, is predicated on helping clients develop an employee ROI model, not just for people who are in revenue generating roles, by the way, but even people in back office non-revenue generation functions. I ask people if they look at the quality of their hiring. And there's a way to actually benchmark. We look at that in terms of the number of people as a whole who make it through 1 year of service. We look at the people in terms of their KPIs or their performance and their performance management plans at the end of their annual review. How do they score? So do you have a formal process in place? And how often do you measure your quality of hire? And so here's what I want to explain to you is we really measure 3 criteria in quality of hiring. Performance. How are your people performing in the aggregate? The new people, those who are hired in this current calendar year. Productivity. We look at their key performance indicators. Again, we look at what they're actually accomplishing. And then the retention is the number of people who stay. I just recently did a video in my playlist on YouTube in terms of great organizations. I looked at W.L. Gore, billion-dollar company, privately held, tens of thousands of employees, and they have a 3% annual they have a 3% turnover rate. That means they only lose 3% of their people every year. Why? Because they have spent decades building an amazing workplace culture. And this is how you take a look at the snapshot of the people you're bringing in the quality of your hire. Now I ask people in this workforce vitality audit, have you done performance reviews? And I want to know how frequently. If you tell me once a year or once a quarter even, that's not enough. That's why I say performance reviews are really a horrible way to obtain feedback and give feedback to your people and their performance. I'd rather it be on a daily or weekly basis, and then we re-architect the performance model around that. And how do you use performance reviews? Typically, you do it. It's one directional, meaning the manager tells the direct report. It's almost never a 180 where the employee gets to give a performance review of their management in the organization. We don't typically factor in a 360 with other groups. So then I look at goals. I look at an organization's goals. Do they have them for every individual? Do individual goals fit into team goals, which fit into organizational goals? So they're tiered or nuanced across those 3 organizational levels: senior leadership, middle management, and frontline staff. And what are the goals? And then, there's this whole notion of Marcus Buckingham, who was global head of research at ADP, is famous for writing in his book, The 9 Lies We Talk About at Work, the fallacy of having successful goals. Who's doing your people's goals? Who's setting them? Do they have control over them? Are they realistic? I mean, there's a whole kind of field of research and organizational behavior about the efficacy of goal setting. And as I said, who's setting the goals? This matters. Do you have a succession plan? It's the hit by the bus plan. Do you have, for all your strategic thought leaders, influencers, champions, VIPs, do you have a bench? And is your bench up to date? Meaning if somebody leaves, if they, unbeknownst to you, they're ready to retire, or they want to go start a side hustle, do you have a formative, actionable succession plan that's up to date and ready to implement? Does your company enable your employees to have control over the work? So this is where this comes from. It's this whole Daniel Pink model of, do my people have complete control over who they work with, when they work, where they work from, and how they do their work? And you can literally ask each employee for those 4 criteria on a scale of 1 to 10. Almost 1 is no real control, to 10 is complete control. 4 questions, a maximum of 10 on each. That means each employee can give you a 40 as a top line score, or if a lowest score is 1 on each of those 4, then it's a 4 out of 40. But it doesn't matter. You can implement it tomorrow. Truth be told, middle management, senior leadership, they're so far removed in that 20th century command control pyramid structure, which if you've watched my videos, I can't stand. And that's a vestige of an outdated 20th century way of doing business. But that pyramid control, the people all the way at the bottom who are closest to the work, they're the only ones who are in a strategic position to determine how to do the work most effectively. I recently did a video again on my YouTube channel on organizations doing great stuff on Morningstar, the tomato company in Southern California. They were founded in 1970. They don't have any functional job titles, and people are hired and enabled, empowered, given all the resources they need to do exactly what they need to do to achieve success. So then the next thing is, how do you measure your employee engagement? Or do they feel, and I know we're going to get bogged down in diversity, equity, inclusion, but if you add a letter to that, the letter B, belonging. Do people feel like their voice is heard? Do you fund idea generation programs? Do you engage them in terms of participation in the culture of your organization? Do they have a sense of empowerment? Are they allowed to make great, take risks and fail greatly? Are they coached and mentored? Is there reward and recognition? I mean, these are the kinds of things that fall into engagement in a day in, day out functional basis. How are you measuring engagement from your people's perspective? How frequently? Have you conducted a human capital audit? So now, this is something that I've developed, again, as a proprietary methodology that I use in my consulting practice. But what we do in a human capital audit, and I've developed a web application years ago to actually allow companies to track this. You take a look at your current employee, every single one of them, and you look at her and his and their roles and responsibilities. And then you map that, right, to all the things you're paying them for when you hired them that are not being utilized effectively outside of those core roles and responsibilities that they're doing on a day-in, day-out basis, meaning background, education, training, certification, cultural diversity. Did they live or study abroad? Do they have outside interests? Do they volunteer? There's a massive amount, collectively, a massive amount of untapped potential, that human capital potential. And unless you audit it, unless you look at every employee in every department, in every functional area, and say, what could you ostensibly offer our organization if we simply stop for a moment and architected a people strategy here to unleash our people's unleveraged expertise? And that's what human capital audit is all about. And I learned this from many years working in the private sector, leading marketing and sales and product management teams, and looking at people who were cast in the wrong roles. They weren't allowed to job share. They weren't allowed to move around and rotate and experience different pieces of the organization and really decide whether they could flourish in their career and professional development. And then the next is, I simply ask one of the final questions in this Workforce Vitality Audit, and you get points, by the way, for each of these questions based on your response, and then we tabulate the kind of culture you have. Do you have anywhere from dead organization that's barely on life support, you don't know it, but your organization is going to go out of business soon, versus world-class organization? These are some of the programs that amazing workplaces that are structured, that are built foundationally from the ground up to support their people. This is what you offer them. This is what you implement, you institutionalize on a programmatic basis. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit different than my usual video. Please, please, please smash the subscribe button if you don't subscribe to the channel. Share this, forward it, give me your comments. I'd love to know what you think. I am pathologically dedicated to seeing organizations go from barely surviving to thriving. And we know there's 3 levers you can pull in your organization. If you've watched my other videos, you may have heard me say this ad nauseum, but there's 3 ways you can impact your organization. And only one of them gives lasting competitive advantage. Strategy. It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Strategies change, often, quite frequently. That's the first lever. Operational efficiency. There's only so much blood you can squeeze from a stone. Because of technology, transformation, we know that we're optimizing the efficiency of our operations. The last only meaningful competitive advantage is your people. And gosh darn it, too many organizations are not tapping into the full potential of their people. So thanks for checking out the video. Come back soon. Check out the other playlist, including the 2 seasons of Chasing the Dream, a workforce culture podcast. And I look forward to having you come into the channel and check out other videos. And if you like, again, the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with other people. Thanks so much for taking time to check out Chasing the Dream.